Chapter 1. Deception Detection. Researchers have developed new strategies to help police and other investigators catch phonies in the act. Research has consistently revealed that one's ability to identify lies is no more precise than chance or flipping a coin. This finding holds true across all kinds of people: students, psychologists, judges, job interviewers, and law enforcement workers. Footnote 1. Especially when investigating criminal offense, the need for precise deception detection is critical for policemen who need to get criminals off the streets without detaining innocent suspects. Standard police practices in deception detection stem from early theories on lying that assume liars will show stress-based hints since they fear being caught and feel guilty about lying. This concept led scientists to search for trustworthy behavioral indicators of deception. They examined behaviors like posture shifts, gaze hostility, and foot and hand movements, without much success. "There actually is no Pinocchio's nose," says Judy Burgoon, Ph.D., a teacher of communication at the University of Arizona. Given these early findings, today's scientists are exploring new techniques of deception detection. Instead of taking a look at people for visual cues that they might be dissembling, like an absence of eye contact or fidgeting, psychologists are now focused on developing proactive strategies that job interviewers can use to elicit signs of deceptiveness, says Maria Hartwig, Ph.D., Associate Professor of Psychology at John Jay College of Lawbreaker Justice. The view now is that the interaction between deceiver and observer is a tactical interplay, she says. Such research has huge potential to transform law enforcement, military, and economic sector examinations, says Christian Miesner, Ph.D., a professor of psychology at Iowa State University, who studies the psychological processes underlying investigative interviews. Questions and cues. Phonies have a predicament, says Ray Bull, Ph.D., a professor of criminal investigation at the University of Derby in the United Kingdom. They have to comprise a story to account for the time of misdeed, but they can't be sure what evidence the interview has against them. Both Bull and Hartwig conduct research on criminal investigative interview methods that encourage suspects to talk while interviewers gradually expose proof. Their research regularly shows that being strategic about revealing evidence of criminal acts to suspects increases deceptiveness detection precision rates above chance levels. Footnote 2. Here's an example. Hartwig and Associates conducted a series of studies to show that withholding proof until late in the interview leaves room for guilty suspects to blatantly lie, for example, by denying remaining in the area of the criminal offense. When the interviewer reveals proof demonstrating the suspect was there, like monitoring footage, the suspect has to either scramble to make up another lie or tell the truth. The suspect might admit to being in the area, but still deny the criminal activity. If the interviewer then presents more evidence, like matching fingerprints from the criminal activity scene, the liar will find it progressively hard to keep up the deceptiveness. Footnote 3. Aldert Vree, Ph.D., a teacher of used social psychology at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom, also focuses his research on using techniques to outmaneuver phonies. Phonies are doing more than telling their stories. They need to make a persuading impression, he says. If the interviewer makes the interview harder, it makes the already difficult task of lying even harder. Another way to make lying harder is to increase the interviewee's cognitive load by, for example, asking to tell their stories in reverse order. Truth tellers can depend on their memories to tell their story backwards, usually including more specifics, but phonies tend to struggle. Research shows that phonies also usually supply less specifics about time, area, and things they heard. They also speak more gradually, with more doubts and grammatical mistakes. Footnote 4. Encouraging interviewees to say more throughout their interviews also helps determine liars. Truth-tellers don't immediately say everything they need to say, so when the job interviewer motivates them to say more, they give additional info, says Vree. Phonies usually have a ready story with little more to say. They may not have the imagination to come up with more, or they may hesitate to say more for fear they will get caught. It's especially useful to ask unforeseen questions in interviews, Vree has found. Because phonies usually prepare their stories, surprise questions can leave them going to pieces for a reaction or opposing themselves. Footnote 5. Other avenues of research are taking a look at how liars and non-liars talk. Burgoon studies sentence intricacy, phrase redundancy, declaration context, and other factors that can distinguish truth-tellers from phonies. Footnote 6. If liars plan what they're going to say, they will have a larger amount of words, she says. But if liars have to answer on the spot, they say less relative to truth-tellers. That's because trying to control what they say consumes cognitive resources. They might use more single-syllable words, repeat particular words, or use words that convey unpredictability, such as might instead of will, she says. Taking a look at word count and word choice works well for an analysis of text, such as interview transcripts, 911 call records, witness and suspect written declarations, and in analyses of written evidence like emails and social network posts. Research is still needed to understand how well investigators can pick up these cues in real time, says Burgoon. Research is also taking a look at the communication between co-conspirators by exploring how two or more people engage as they try to trick interviewers. Footnote 7. In field circumstance, like checkpoints and street corners, people conspire to get away with crime and terrorist acts, says psychologist James Driscoll, Ph.D., president of the Florida Maxima Corporation, a business that performs research in behavioral and social science. If two people are lying, they have to concoct a story that is consistent with their co-conspirator so they don't arouse suspicion, says Driscoll. If an officer needs to engage them on the street, it would work to know what indications to try and find in their reactions. Compared with truth-tellers, when liars tell their story together, they tend not to connect with one another, and they are less likely to elaborate on one another's reactions, he says. Sincere dyads are much more interactive as they rebuild a shared event from memory, he says. Chapter 1 Footnotes. Number 1, Character and Social Psychology Review, 2006. Number 2, Journal of Investigative Psychology and Offender Profiling, 2011. Law and Human Conduct, 2006. Number 3, Trustworthy Assessment, Scientific Research and Applications, 2014. Number 4, Law and Human Conduct, 2008. Number 5, Applied Cognitive Psychology, 2014. Number 6, Journal of Language and Social Psychology, 2006. Number 7, Human Aspects, the Journal of the Human Factors and Ergonomic Society, 2012. Chapter 2, Self-Sabotage. Overcoming self-defeating conduct. Have you ever found yourself pursuing a crucial objective only to struggle terribly since you did something dumb? Or maybe you feel stressed and restless when you're trying to accomplish something crucial. This, in turn, might make you feel increasingly more annoyed, discouraged, and upset with yourself. Those feelings trap you and keep you from doing what you really need to do. These are all signs of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage deteriorates your self-confidence and self-esteem and affects your relationships with others. With every failed effort to do the thing you really want, you prove to yourself that you can't or shouldn't do it. Learn how to realign your thoughts, emotions, and habits. Whatever self-sabotaging behaviors you have, it's necessary that you overcome them if you are to take advantage of your life and your profession. Luckily, you can get away from self-sabotaging conduct, and this chapter shows you how. What is self-sabotage? Sabotage is the act of ruining or undermining something, often in a hidden way. Generally, it implies direct and deliberate participation on the part of the saboteur. That's why the word is most frequently used in relation to spying, or in business situations where an insider is triggering the damage. The term self-sabotage is used when this destructive behavior is directed at yourself. In the beginning, you might not even see that you're doing it. However, when negative routines consistently undermine your efforts, they can be considered a kind of psychological self-harm. Signs of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage can manifest in many different habits, unique to each person. However, there are some typical recurring examples. You may, quote-unquote, forget a deadline, or fail to prepare a presentation appropriately, for example. Perhaps you're consistently late for work. You may postpone, repeatedly postponing something that you need to do, despite the fact that you know you need to finish it. Perhaps you start projects but never finish them. You feel unable to continue, even when you have an interesting opportunity. Or you may dream of doing something of great personal significance, but never get around to doing anything about it. Another indication of self-sabotage is that you grind to a halt for no rational reason when you're trying to achieve your goals. The ability and the will are there, but something stops you moving on. Self-sabotage is usually driven by negative self-talk, where you tell yourself that you are inadequate or unworthy of success. You find yourself thinking things like, "You can't do that. You don't deserve that. If you try, you'll most likely just flop anyhow." We've likely all developed habits like these at some time. However, some of us are more prone than others to self-sabotage, and it can be difficult to admit when we're doing it. So don't ignore or undervalue the signs. Self-sabotage can strengthen a lost sense of worthlessness and provide a validation for negative ideas that have no basis in reality. Self-sabotage and self-confidence. One of the crucial reasons people self-sabotage is an absence of self-esteem. That can have several causes, but the impacts are all the same. Feelings of insignificance, the belief that you don't deserve success, and even self-hatred. You may worry that if you fail, your family will think less of you, or that if you achieve success, your colleagues will be jealous. Those deep-seated ideas and emotions trigger negative self-talk, which fuels your fears and your self-sabotaging habits. Some people self-sabotage because it makes them feel in control of their situations. By rescuing a scenario after undermining it, they may get a short-term boost to their confidence. It might even feel temporarily exhilarating. Still, these quote-unquote rewards turn out to be damaging in the long term. How self-sabotage will damage you. Self-sabotage sets you up to struggle in certain ways. First, it reinforces negative habits that eat away at your potential for success. You might continuously find yourself falling short of the objectives that you've set for yourself. It can also harm your reputation. If you don't do what you say you're going to, there's a very real risk that your boss and colleagues could come to see you as unreliable, uncommitted, lazy, or not having drive. People who self-sabotage may also behave passive-aggressively and have difficulty managing anger. These propensities damage relationships with friends, family, and colleagues. Such failures and dissatisfactions produce more emotions of guilt and aggravation. In time, this can develop into embarrassment, and that feeds low self-confidence. Beating self-sabotage. Number 1. Recognize your self-sabotaging behaviors. To stop self-sabotage, you need to start by recognizing your own self-sabotaging habits. Think about goals that you've had for a long time but have never achieved. Are there specific parts where you're delaying deciding? Are you experiencing a lack of inspiration, even for essential things? Consider something that you frequently flop at for no apparent reason. Is there something you do or don't do that consistently irritates other individuals, your boss in specific? Is there an activity or task that nags at you and triggers your frustration because you know you could do it or do it better? It may hurt to ask yourself questions like these, but it's necessary. Pay attention to issue situations so that you can better comprehend what's happening. Number 2. Understand the feelings that cause the behavior. Self-sabotaging behavior often stems from feelings of anxiety, anger, and insignificance. For instance, you may have intentionally left a report unfinished since your boss blanked you in the passage, and this made you mad and upset. The event activated the emotion, and that in turn caused a self-defeating action. In simple fact, your boss may have been deep in thought about something else, and would be surprised and sorry to realize that they'd upset you. However, your psychological reaction doesn't take account for that. Always aim to manage your feelings, so that you don't commit to behaviors that have negative consequences, or that unjustly affect others. Check the warning signs of anger and anxiety before they get out of control. Caution. Make sure not to overlook strong feelings. They're likely an indication that something is very wrong. Number 3. Spot the thinking or beliefs that trigger the feeling. Chances are, the emotion that caused your negative conduct was triggered by illogical thoughts. Consider the evidence for those thoughts. In the previous example, your boss wasn't being dismissive because they didn't like you. They just had a ton of other things to think about. Notice what you say to yourself when you engage in self-sabotaging conduct. Make a note of all your negative self-talk, as silly or unrealistic as it might seem. The ideal time to do this is when you're participating in the conduct. Monitor your quote-unquote stream of awareness and write it down. In our example, you may catch yourself thinking, "I'm such a failure. My boss has most likely reached the end of their patience with me." When you know what your negative self-talk is, ask yourself what much deeper beliefs lie behind this self-sabotaging thinking. Are those beliefs reasonable? Are they based upon any clear facts? Number 4. Change your habits, feelings, and ideas. As you become aware of the negative emotions, behaviors, and thoughts that trigger self-sabotage, you can begin to challenge them. If you can change one of these 3 elements, the other 2 will change more quickly too. Challenge negative attitude with rational, positive affirmations. Turn your assumptions around and get some much-needed perspectives. Then link this new positive self-talk to what you can achieve and what you want to accomplish. When your abilities, beliefs, and habits are lined up, you can create the mental, emotional, and physical states necessary to do whatever you set your mind to. Caution. Simply changing your behavior isn't likely to beat your self-sabotage routine in the long term if you don't also change the emotions and thoughts that lie behind it. However, it can help if you notice, learn a lot from, and give yourself credit for more positive outcomes, as this helps to break the cycle of negativity. Number 5. Develop self-supporting behaviors. When you've recognized and started to beat the false rationale for your self-sabotaging behaviors, you can begin to reconstruct your self-confidence. Consider the following questions. What can you say to yourself that's positive or encouraging? What choices do you have? Is there more than one way to attain your objective? Can you build self-confidence by setting and attaining smaller goals on your way to achieving the bigger ones? Then use your answers to think of a message that motivates you to move in a positive direction. An example would be the following. Despite the fact that I might not finish this project on time, I know that I have the resources and abilities I need to get me through. When I start to deal with the task, I know I'm going to throw off a ton of the tension and anxiety I've been carrying around while I've been hesitating. Key points. Self-sabotage is behavior that weakens your success, regardless of your own desires, dreams, or values. The roots of self-sabotage typically lie in low self-confidence, negative self-talk, and associated negative emotions, and are continually strengthened by the resulting failure. You can beat self-sabotage by monitoring your habits, feelings, ideas, and beliefs about yourself, and challenging them when they stand between you and your goals. Once you understand what is behind self-sabotage, you can develop positive, self-supporting behaviors to keep you on the right track. Why we self-sabotage, and what factors cause you to flip the switch. We all have things we want in our lives. To lose those pesky 10 pounds, achieve that big promotion, go on a second date with someone we're interested in, or take that fantasy trip. We set a goal that is near and dear to our hearts, and repeat it to ourselves in our heads and aloud to others more times than we can count. We've written this objective on Post-its, lists, calendars, maybe even thoroughly selected an image to put on a vision board, restroom mirror, or refrigerator to influence us. We've shared this goal with our friends and family and announced that this is the year we're going to make it happen. Maybe we even asked one of them to hold us liable to attain it. So why do we get in our own way? In order to comprehend where self-sabotage originates from, we need to learn some crucial ideas about human conduct and raise our consciousness of what might be running disturbance in the background. You might be shocked to learn that the tendency to commit self-sabotage is built into our neurobiology and woven into the very material of what makes us human. Actually, its roots aren't so ugly after all. The source of self-sabotage is part of a common ancestral and evolutionary adaptation that has permitted us to persevere as a species in the first place. To comprehend how self-sabotage is connected to our human existence, we really need to take a look at the two basic principles that drive our survival: attaining rewards and staying away from threats. We are basically programmed to strive for objectives because achieving them makes us feel good. That dopamine rush is an incentive to repeat those habits. The technique, particularly when it comes to self-sabotage, is that our biochemistry doesn't necessarily discriminate between the kind of feel-good feelings we experience when we're going toward our goals and the quote-unquote good emotions when we stay away from something that seems threatening. Additionally, where animals worry only about physical survival, humans also need to maintain their psychological well-being. In fact, an occasion that's psychologically threatening can set off similar fight-or-flight responses as events that are physically threatening. Achieving benefits and staying away from threats are a lot like two sides of a coin. They aren't independent systems, and there's a constant interaction in the brain to try to bring the two drives to an equilibrium. When we balance achieving benefits and staying away from threats, all is well. We feel good about ourselves, and we ensure our physical and psychological wellness. Still, when these two desires are out of whack, we're primed to self-sabotage. Particularly, the pursuit of staying away from threats at the expense of attaining benefits takes us from our desired objectives. Self-sabotage occurs when your drive to lower threats is higher than your drive to attain benefits. So why do we at times overstate a danger and enable us to stop it from continuing on our path to our objective? The answer is LIFE happens. In my research and through my experience in working with clients, I've found time and again that there are 4 components that sustain the conflict between going for what you really want and being held back by perceived threats that actually won't hurt you. LIFE. Low or unstable self-image, internalized beliefs, fear of change or the unknown, extreme need for control. These 4 impacts represent aspects of your character and how you relate to the world. You can come up with them like an operating system that runs in the background and drives your beliefs and behavior. We generally acquire these LIFE aspects when we are younger, and since we get them gradually, they have the tendency to be outside of our awareness. It's very useful to focus on them so that you can faster see how they inform your decisions, your ideas about yourself, how you behave, how you feel in certain scenarios, and especially how they can be drivers of self-sabotage. Learning to recognize them will help you examine when LIFE is triggering you to overstate a hazard and putting you on a course to self-sabotage. And knowledge is the first step to stopping the patterns of behavior that hold you back from living the life you want. Why do I keep doing what I don't want to do? Eliminating bad habits is really hard for a real reason. In spite of the fact that my father was a heavy smoker and modeled for me how smoking resulted in ravaging health outcomes, I ended up being a smoker in my adult years. Though I know that he passed away of a heart attack when he was 58, and that it was in large part due to his smoking practice, I chose in my 20s to try it out. I wanted to see what all the hubbub was about. While you'd think that my dad's emphysema and bronchitis that made him wheeze just from walking to a completely different room would make me an intense challenger of smoking, still I stupidly picked up one cigarette after another and lit it up. I can strongly remember times when I was smoking and believing to myself, "This is actually dumb." Puff. "I can't actually believe I'm doing this." Exhale. "I don't even enjoy it." Cough. In the winter season, I'd have to leave parties and dinners to go outside in the freezing cold and look after my practice. I'd be hugging myself tightly to protect myself from the cold and bring my shivering hand up to my mouth for another shot of heat and smoke. Boy, I'd be thinking, it sure appears like they're having fun in there. Why in the world did I do it? And why didn't I quit quicker than I did? Looking back on it now, I understand now that there is a behavior reason that the habit persisted, and that only a behavioral approach to quitting could ever work. I'd like to clarify how a practice like smoking can work against you, and then specify the kind of behavioral adjustments that I ultimately used to kick the habit for good. Benefits and punishments, the backbone of every little thing we do. Once you are a pitiful smoker, habit in full blossom, your body has come to depend on the nicotine that you are consuming at routine periods. If you try to quit smoking all of a sudden, you're going to learn that your practice is tied to extremely specific ecological cues that make your body prepare for the arrival of the nicotine. For me, these hints included alcohol, food, my wife, my back patio, watching TV, and driving in my automobile. In essence, everything. All kidding aside, here's what was going on. Let's say I take a beer out of the refrigerator. I grab the bottle opener, and my brain says to my body, "Red alert! Red alert! He's gonna have a cigarette!" My body, understanding that the nicotine and smoke are about to do some crazy things like raise my heart rate and thicken my blood, gets ready for the nicotine and smoke by lowering my heart rate and thinning my blood. Why is that? So that when the compounds hit my system, they don't take me almost as far to a cardiac arrest as they would without these adjustments. That is what psychologists call a conditioned offsetting reaction. Each time you are in the presence of one of your hints, the body's efforts to adjust to the toxins you will introduce aren't that noticeable until you try to quit. Even if I cracked a beer and didn't line up, my body had learned to lower my heart rate and thin my blood. If I was no longer quote-unquote fixing the circumstances by smoking, my body's offsetting reaction left me feeling badly. This feeling was a penalty for not smoking. You catch that? I had messed myself up so much with my practice that my body was penalizing me for not smoking. And after that, to make matters worse, if I gave in and smoked, the tension disappeared, and the positive feeling of the nicotine high filled my brain with a temporary pleasure. That positive feeling was a positive reinforcement, and the tension disappearing was a negative reinforcement. I was being rewarded with the positive feeling, and also with the cessation of a negative feeling. Before I was a smoker, these bodily reactions to hints didn't exist. But once I was hooked, the environmental cues that were the antecedents to my behavior punished me if I resisted, and after that rewarded me twice over for being weak. It's not surprising that breaking a habit is so tough. I'll talk about a behavior plan that can help you counteract your practices and get you on the road to healing. It all starts with determining the nature of the benefits you are getting for your practice, and after that, finding different and incompatible benefits you will give yourself as you quit. I'm going to break this down into small steps so that you can attain shorter and more frequent successes and get the satisfaction of receiving gradually bigger and more amazing rewards. When staying away from torment triggers suffering, sometimes you have to lean into your pain, not range from it. There's a cruel, paradoxical twist to your attempts to avoid pain. You're triggering yourself for more misery in the long run. It's something I see in my treatment office over and over again. Lots of the people who walk through my office door spend almost every waking minute of their days trying not to feel bad. But their efforts to dodge discomfort introduce more torment into their lives. A person who feels stressed reaches for his phone to mindlessly scroll through social media. While his digital gadget offers a quick diversion from reality, taking a look at pictures of people who appear happier than he does actually contributes to his distress. Another person feeds her solitude with food. Sitting down with a plate full of food is a lot like salve on a wound, at least for a minute. However, as quickly as she's done eating, her isolation returns, and she raids the refrigerator again, even though she's not physically hungry. These are vicious cycles that are tough to recognize, let alone break. However, until you disrupt these patterns, you're going to stay stuck in a downward spiral of psychological turmoil. It's likely that all of us have times when we seek instant relief from pain in exchange for long-standing pain. Here are 3 short-term options that might be creating bigger long-term issues in your life. 1. Numbing yourself to pain. Binge watching Netflix and drinking a glass of wine, or 2, to loosen up after a stressful day. Eating since you're restless, and scrolling through social media when you're lonely are just a few ways you may be lured to sidetrack yourself from your emotions. Those techniques temporarily help you avoid uncomfortable feelings, and they often become emotional crutches that help you get through bad days and difficult times. But suppressing emotions doesn't enable you to learn, grow, or recover from them. In addition to your feelings never getting dealt with, those unhealthy routines can also take a toll on your physical health, social life, and psychological wellness. Number 2. Staying away from tough things. Stepping beyond your comfort zone is hard. Whether you take a new class or you obtain a new job, you're very likely to experience anxiety to some extent. You may make a mistake, embarrass yourself, or fall short of your goal, and that would be awkward. So, in an effort to keep away from that pain, it's tempting to play it safe. Living inside of your comfort zone is an effective way to dodge anxiety. But living a small life is also a dish for desolation. Number 3. Giving in to instant gratification. Whether you eat a few extra cookies, or you can't resist inspecting how many likes your latest post got on social media every few minutes, instant gratification comes in a lot of forms. And while giving into temptation will give you short-term pleasure, it will rob you of long-term happiness. Plenty of research backs this up, including the popular marshmallow test. So while saving your cash, sticking to a much healthier diet plan, and staying concentrated on a job might seem like torture for several minutes, they are crucial to reaching your biggest potential. Build your mental muscle. Handling your feelings in a healthy way is a crucial component of psychological strength, and it's a two-way street. The more strength you build, the simpler it ends up being to manage your feelings. And the more you work on dealing with emotions in a healthier way, the stronger you become. Learning how to endure uncomfortable feelings is a skill, and like all skills, it takes practice. But as you gain self-confidence in your capability to feel awkward feelings, you will discover that you are more capable and qualified than your brain gives you credit for. Chapter 3. Our Conscience and Moral Decisions. Morality is readily evident in that their account of what morality is happens to be a conscience-centric one, concentrating on self-regulatory habits, that is, what you personally ought to do. These conscience-based accounts are exceptionally popular amongst lots of people, academics and non-academics alike, perhaps owing to its instinctive appeal. It certainly feels a bit like we don't do certain things as they feel morally wrong, so comprehending morality through conscience looks like the natural starting point. With all due respect to the thoughts and intuitions of people everywhere, they seem to have begun their analysis of morality on totally the wrong foot. Source. This is the key difference, then. Moral conscience, controlling an individual's own behavior, doesn't appear to straightforwardly explain moral condemnation, managing the conduct of others. In spite of this, practically every uttered moral rule or law includes penalizing others for how they behave, at least implicitly. While the specifics of what gets penalized and how much penalty is called for vary to some degree from individual to individual, the general form of ethical guidelines does not. If I were to say that I don't wish to have homosexual sexual intercourse, I'd only be expressing a choice, a bit like mentioning whether I would like my sandwich on wheat or white bread. If I were to say that homosexuality is unethical, I'd be expressing the idea that the ones that take part in the act should be condemned for doing so. By contrast, I wouldn't have an interest in punishing people for making the wrong choice about bread, even if I think they could have made a much better choice. While we cannot necessarily learn much about moral condemnation by means of moral conscience, the reverse isn't true. We can understand ethical conscience quite well through ethical condemnation, provided that there are groups of people who will tend to punish you for doing something. This offers adequate motivation to keep you away from engaging in that act, even if you otherwise highly desire to do so. Murder is an easy example here. There tends to be some advantages for getting rid of certain people from one's world. Whether it be because those others inflict expenses on you or stop the acquisition of benefits, there's little question that murder may periodically be to your advantage. If, however, the potential target of your bloodthirsty intentions happens to have family and friends that would rather not see them dead, thank you very much, the potential expenses those allies may inflict needs to be taken into account. Provided those costs are significantly great, and certain actions are penalized with adequate frequency and time, a system for representing those condemned habits and their potential costs, so as to stay away from taking part in them, could easily develop. Source. There are two ways of responding to that question, neither of which is mutually unique with the other. The first is that the cognitive systems which calculate things like the probability of being discovered and estimate the likely penalty that will ensue are always working under the conditions of unpredictability. Because of the uncertainty, it is inescapable that the system will, once in a while, make errors. In some cases, one could escape without effects when behaving immorally, and one would be better off if they took those chances than if they did not. One also needs to consider the reverse mistake as well, though. If you examine that you're going to not be caught or penalized when you actually will, you'd have been better off not acting immorally, provided the costs of punishment are adequately high, like the loss of social allies, abandonment by sexual partners, the potential loss of your life, etc. It might pay in some situations to still stay away from acting in morally undesirable ways, even when you're almost positive you could get away with it. Footnote 1. The point here is that it does not just matter if you are right or wrong about whether you're likely to be punished. The costs to making every error need to be factored into the cognitive equation as well, and those expenses are often asymmetric. The second way of approaching that question is to suggest that the conscience system is just one cognitive system amongst many, and these systems don't always need to agree with one another. That is, a conscience system may still represent an act as ethically inappropriate, while other systems, those designated to get certain advantages and examine costs, may output an incompatible behavioral choice, such as cheating on your dedicated partner, regardless of understanding that it is morally condemned to do so, as the potential advantages are perceived as being greater than the costs. To the extent that these systems are independent, then, it is possible for each to hold opposing representations about what to do at the exact same time. Examples of this happening in other domains aren't hard to find. The checkerboard impression, for instance, allows us to hold both the likeness that A and B are different colors, and that A and B are the same color in our mind simultaneously. We need not be of one mind about all such matters, since our mind isn't one thing. Antisocial character disorder. Antisocial personality disorder defines a deep-rooted pattern of conduct in which individuals consistently disregard and breach the rights of others around them. This disorder is best understood within the framework of the broader category of character disorders. A character disorder is a long-lasting pattern of personal experience and conduct that deviates visibly from the expectations of the person's culture, is pervasive and inflexible, has a beginning in their teenage or early adult years, is stable over time, and causes personal distress or impairment. The signs of antisocial personality disorder can vary in intensity. The more egregious, damaging, or harmful behavior patterns are described as sociopathic or psychopathic. There has been much dispute as to the distinction between the two descriptions. Sociopathy is mainly characterized as something severely wrong with someone's conscience. Psychopathy is characterized as a total lack of conscience concerning others. Some professionals describe people with this constellation of signs as quote-unquote stone cold to the rights of others. Effects of the disorder can include jail time, substance abuse, and alcoholism. People with this disease may seem lovely on the surface, but they're likely to be irritable and aggressive and also irresponsible. They may have numerous somatic complaints and perhaps attempt suicide. Due to their manipulative propensities, it's tough to tell whether they are lying or telling the truth. The diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder is not given to individuals under the age of 18, but it is only given if there's a history of some signs of conduct disorder before the age of 15. Antisocial personality disorder is a lot more typical in men than in women. The highest occurrence of antisocial personality disorder is found amongst men who abuse alcohol or drugs, or who are in prisons or other forensic settings. Footnote number 1. Delton et al. 2012. Chapter 4. The Craziest Psychopathic Serial Killers of Time. If serial killers are some of the most deranged creatures on earth, is it possible for some serial killers to be more psychopathic than others? As it ends up, it sure is possible, and the murderers on the list prove it. Sexual assault, robbery, cannibalism, and naturally murder. The following 10 men are the most psychopathic serial killers of all time. Ted Bundy. You don't have to be American or have been around in the 1970s to know the name Ted Bundy. Bundy is quickly one of the most deranged serial killers, not to point out kidnappers, rapists, intruders, and necrophiles of all time. His sick modus operandi included kidnapping his female victims, raping them, and then dismembering them. He typically kept their heads as souvenirs. Just before he was executed in 1989, Bundy admitted to kidnapping and murdering 30 women, though this number is almost certainly much higher. Andrei Chikatilo. Between 1978 and 1990, the Russian serial killer Andrei Chikatilo sexually assaulted, killed, and mutilated more than 50 girls and children. One of the youngest was 9 years old. The psychopathic Chikatilo killed his victims by stabbing and slashing them with a knife. Chikatilo later admitted that he was only able to accomplish orgasm by stabbing women, a truth that made it challenging for him to withstand his strong urges to kill. Chikatilo was nicknamed the Butcher of Rostov, the Red Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper. Though he confessed to an overall of 56 brutal murders, he was charged with 53, sentenced to death, and executed by firing squad in 1994. Jeffrey Dahmer. No list of the most psychopathic serial killers would be complete without Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer, referred to as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was ultimately convicted of murdering 17 young men over a 14-year period. However, Dahmer didn't just murder them. He also raped, dismembered, and sometimes even ate his victims. Throughout his trial, Dahmer admitted to drilling a hole into his victims' heads in an attempt to turn them into mindless sex slaves. While Dahmer definitely would have been executed for his deranged criminal offenses, he was beaten to death in jail in 1994. Albert Fish. When a serial killer is called the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, and the Boogeyman, it's almost certain that he is thoroughly deranged. Fish was tried and found guilty of raping, killing, and cannibalizing 3 kids in the early 1900s. However, he said that he had killed more like 100 kids, and even boasted that he, quote, had children in every state, unquote. Particularly deranged is the simple fact that Fish sent out a letter to the mother of one of his victims, 10-year-old Grace Budd. The letter detailed how he had lured the little girl, strangled her, and after that cut her into pieces to eat throughout 9 days. John Wayne Gacy. There's deranged, and then there's the kind of deranged that describes the serial killer John Wayne Gacy. He was nicknamed Killer Clown because of his job participating in children's birthday parties and charitable events as Pogo the Clown. Gacy was convicted of raping, torturing, and killing 33 teenage boys over a 6-year period. He would draw them into his home, kill them through either strangulation or asphyxiation, then bury them on his property. Gacy was executed in May of 1994. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper may be a name that everyone knows, but no one can be certain of his true identity. Whoever he or she really was, Jack the Ripper was certainly psychopathic. In 1888, Jack terrorized the Whitechapel neighborhood of London by slitting the throats and abdomens of at least 5 harlots and leaving them for dead. Sometimes he would even remove the woman's uterus and take it as a sort of prize. It's not likely that Jack the Ripper's true identity will ever be determined, but ripperology, the study and analysis of the murders, has certainly motivated numerous what-if novels and movies. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez's deranged killing spree is terrifying enough, but maybe even more scary is the simple fact that Lopez's current whereabouts are unknown. The Colombian claims to have raped and killed more than 300 women all across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. At least 100 of these were tribal women. In 1980, the monster of the Andes was apprehended and led police to the graves of 53 of his victims between the ages of 9 and 12. Lopez was condemned of killing 110 girls in Ecuador. He also confessed to an extra 240 murders in Peru and Colombia, and was declared insane. Amazingly, Lopez was released in 1998 for quote-unquote etiquette, and while there are a lot of rumors, no one can verify precisely where he is today. Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais was a rich knight and lord, a leader in the French army, and a companion in arms to Joan of Arc. He was also a completely deranged serial killer. Between 1432 and 1433, Gilles apparently sodomized and then killed, or ordered the murder, of at least 40 children. A large number of naked bodies of young kids were found at his estate in 1437. A 1971 biography of de Rais describes the way the knight drew the boys to their deaths. He outfitted them in fancy clothing, provided them with a large meal and a ton of white wine. Finally, he faced every boy with the quote-unquote true nature of his situation. Richard Ramirez. For more than a year during the 1980s, Richard Ramirez terrified communities throughout Los Angeles. Nicknamed Night Stalker, Ramirez would burglarize houses and completely murder his victims, in some cases raping them first. His victims varied from early 20s to a 79-year-old woman. His weapons of choice included handguns, knives, a tire iron, a machete, and even a hammer. Ramirez never ever expressed any remorse for his crimes. He was sentenced to death but died of lymphoma before he could be executed. Chapter 5. How to Outsmart a Master Manipulator. "Why am I letting you comfort me?" He gazed over her head. "Because I have made sure you have nobody else to turn to." Cresley Cole Lothair. A master manipulator differs from the other puppet masters, since he or she is very good at what they do and also very subtle. They have two primary goals: to achieve what they want and not to be caught controlling other individuals, because, well, news of the sort spreads fast. To attain these two goals, they use their observations of other individuals to actively prepare each step necessary to get what they really want. There are circa 150 searches monthly just on Google asking these two interesting questions: how to be a manipulator and how to become a master manipulator. I did discover several people that behave like they have a PhD in manipulation. Keep away from contact with a master manipulator. Yeah, I know, you're thinking, duh, do you always state the obvious? But if you can do it, stay away from emotional manipulators. Say no to being manipulated. A lot of us pity others that don't always deserve our pity, and accept things that break our better judgment. Just say no. The more frequently you practice it, the easier it ends up being. You're still a pretty good person even if you say no from time to time, and you know this for a fact. Neglect the would-be manipulator. If you can't keep away from a master manipulator, then find ways to ignore them. Don't contradict them, listen to them, nod, then do whatever you think is best to do anyway. Set personal limits. Oh, this is so important it has me shuddering with impatience to put the words down on my computer screen. Setting limits is so essential in any kind of relationship. It's a lot much easier to do so at the very beginning of the relationship when people don't know what to expect of you than it is to change course midway, when they'll begin asking questions and try to make you feel guilty for doing it. How to do it? Let them know plainly that you will decline certain behaviors. No, I'm sorry, you can't use my notes. I put a ton of work into them, and I'd like to present them myself when I'm done with the preliminary draft. It's sort of like the second point, saying no, but it's saying no with a function. No, I won't go with you to the one in charge to pitch your half-brain idea and help you request for a promotion. No, you can't call me every night. We're not in a relationship and I really need to study for my test. I'll call you when I have the time to do so. Or, stop calling, please. You're a really good person, but we aren't a good match. I think you're better off looking for a person that matches more with you. Set goals, and you'll see if someone tries to manipulate you from them. If you plainly specify your objectives, personal improvement, professional career, health, financial and relationship goals, it will be that much tougher for someone else to control you to their own benefit. When you know where you are going, your course on how to arrive becomes clearer, and you'll be able to see distractions and detours from that course for what they really are. Assume responsibility for what you do. Good or bad, Manipulators, specifically at work, tend to make the most of other people's work and claim it for their own, and they are actually good at blaming someone else for their own errors. Track every little thing you are involved in. Calls, texts, meetings, your work, their work, whatever you have access to, finances, and so on. Make certain you don't go too far and infringe on their right to privacy by recording, using or keeping track of software without their knowledge or consent, because it can have some serious legal repercussions. Review workplace personal privacy and partner tracking before you do anything. It's usually acceptable for you to keep a notebook or a diary with times and days and a description of what took place. Make sure you leave a proof and/or files on your computer system detailing your personal work and your individual part in a work task. Keep your call history part of the phone expense, and save the text messages and emails you get. Do not get emotionally involved. Your feelings can be manipulated. I'm still working on this one myself, but I think I'm making progress. Master manipulators will twist and blow your feelings out of proportion once they find out which buttons to push. Recognize mental illness when you see it. At times, there's no manipulator to outsmart, but just a disease and the need of treatment. Be a person they'd rather stay away from tinkering with. This goes together with setting boundaries. Make it too hard to get what they want from you, and too risky for them to be found if they try to manipulate you. Hit them where it hurts. Turn their allies into enemies. Ruin their power base. Let the other girls know he's cheating. Make sure what you do doesn't land you in more trouble than it solves. But wait, there's a 12th way on how to handle a master manipulator. Not advised. How to manipulate a manipulator. Control a manipulator. As Athena Walker masterfully defines in her answer on Quora, quote, "In routine dealings, the issue of outwitting is that it typically takes manipulation to do this. We control all of the time. It's how we live our lives. So trying to turn that around and using it to me, chances are the tactic you are going to use, I have used it. I have used it, abused it, and already grown past it. So I'm going to recognize it quickly. It's tended to be advised to not try it because we're great at studying you, whereas you're less inclined to be as proficient at studying us. If you, however, choose to go on with it, make certain the possibility of failure is acceptable to you. Be patient. Be really subtle. Observe, learn, and check your conclusions ever so discreetly, cautious not to arouse their suspicions.